Hello and welcome to the SSL Certificates Introduction. Today, we're going to cover the following topics. Essentially, what is a certificate? We'll talk about the different types of the certificates, talk about the certificate formats, and we'll talk about the Mitel Connect SSL certificate requirements for the import. So what is a certificate? Essentially, a small data file made up of two components, two keys, a public key and a private key. And the reason we would like to have a certificate is it encrypts our data, essentially encrypts our data in transit. And secondly, among the multiple reasons, one of the main ones is it authenticates the identity of the service. Essentially, the authenticating server we're trying to connect to, the certificate will prove that that server is the server that we think it is. So talking about the keys, a public key is available and given to anyone who asks. In other words, if you were to attempt an SSL session at connect.packetfusion.com, that server hands you the public key as part of that initial connection attempt. A private key, on the other hand, remains confidential and is never exchanged. Anything encrypted with the public key may only be decrypted by its partner private key and vice versa. In other words, the web server that is hosting connect.packetfusion.com is going to keep that private key and is the only person that has the private key. So any of the data that we encrypt at the client can only be seen from the web server that owns that private key. So when a SSL session first gets set up, there are a couple of validation steps that most clients go through. Firstly, every certificate that is issued is going to be signed by a trusted cert authority unless it is a self-sign. Then the connection attempt that you're making, say connect.packetfusion.com, should match the name on that certificate. And lastly, every certificate has a time period that it is valid for. So among the different types of certificates, we have the single standalone certificate, we have the multiple domain SAN, or what you call as the subject alternative name, or the UCC certificates. And then the most commonly used ones are what Mitel prefers, are the wildcard certificates. The standard single name certificates provide SSL certification for one domain. Most commonly purchased, probably the least cost. Some of the examples that we see there, packetfusion.com, www.packetfusion.com. With a multi-domain /SAN, SAN, or a UCC certificate, you can secure multiple domains. You can do this by adding the subject alternative names during the initial request for the certificate, or you could even add it on later. Depending on who you purchase from, you can add up to 200 subject alternative names. Cost more than a standard certificate. Some of the examples we provided there, www.packetfusion.com, connect.packetfusion.com, meeting.packetfusion.com, mobility.packetfusion.com. It should be known that the mobility platform has its own CSR generation capability, just as an FYI. And lastly, the wildcard certificates, the ones that Mitel prefers, and frankly, the ones that are the easiest to manage. These provide unlimited amount of domain servers, sites that can be secured. Costs a little bit more than the domain name certificates. Multiple encryption algorithms are supported. Depending on the vendor, free reissues for the lifetime of the certificate is also possible. Some of the examples provided there. So let's talk about some of the most common certificate formats we usually run into. First of all, the .csr is the actual request that you generate from your server that in turn goes into, it gets applied to the certificate authority and they issue you the certificate. Once the certificate is issued, it is likely to be in one of these formats. And the most common format, the one that Mitel wants, is the base64 encoded X.509 in its two most common file extensions of .cer or .crt. In the Mitel documentation, this format may even be referred to as Apache or the PEM format, but essentially you can open this file in a text editor and it's in human readable format, numbers and letters. The other format that you most likely are going to run into is the DER encoded binary X.509. If you open this, you're probably going to run into some bold, some highlighted numbers and characters. You'll see some characters that are neither numbers nor alphabets. In that case, you're most likely looking at a certificate that is not in the base64 encoded or the PEM or the Apache format. So some of the key points or a summary from the last few slides that we've seen. All certificates should be in base64 format for the installation. We should provide the whole certificate chain when importing into the director, including all intermediate and root certificates. Now, this is important. The ECC absolutely depends and does require this particular fact. Different devices, appliances have their own formatting required for the installation. So if you were installing the certificates in a director, you really essentially have a pick list of files that you browse to and import into the director. When it comes to the edge gateway or the service appliances or the mobility router, it's basically a cut and paste from a notepad. That's the method for the import of the certificates. And finally, here's a quick table to just show differences between the show-tell sign or the self-signed certificates vis-a-vis the public certificates. The show-tell sign certificates come out of the box and are trusted by all our hardware. So long as the phones download that certificate properly, generally things work. On the other hand, the public certificates, they're trusted by the client computers. And if you want to see a nice green lock on your Connect client to show security or a secure connection, you want to install a third-party certificate. Show-tell signed certificates always used for phone registration. So even if you have a third-party certificate installed, the phones generally use self-signed certificates or the show-tell signed certificates for its registration. Now, third-party certificates do get used by CAS features. So anything that CAS requires, like voicemail access, directory access, they do use third-party certificates. So all in all, again, show-tell sign, self-sign just works. Third-party certificates, as long as you followed process, installed it correctly, and basically propagated the certificate, it should be a seamless installation. Thank you again for your time, and this is Sushant signing off.